right, gents. So there's a lot going on with CMS right now, Center for Medicaid Services. And Daniel, I know you like to sleep with this under your pillow every night. So, what is going on in the world of CMS, workers' compensation specifically? What do our listeners need to know about what's the latest with them?
Yeah, so the biggest question I get from my clients is how long is it taking CMS to give a decision? And the
24
quickest
hours,
times,
right?
yes, if you're on your game, but typically two weeks would be the absolute soonest. The problem is we're getting a lot of development letters, and I don't know what the cause is. I suspected they were getting such a volume of submissions that they needed to kind of build in a break. So they asked for more information from the parties. I don't know if that's true, but that's one of my conspiracy theories. If you get everything submitted and they don't need anything new, 2 weeks, and we can get a decision pretty quickly. Probably half of the cases, they're coming back rubber stamped, in the amount we propose. If you're within 10% of what CMS calculates, then under the reference guide, they will approve your amount that was proposed. So my goal is to try to get within 10% of what I think they'll approve.
Yeah, when people submit, are people submitting with a structured settlement involved, with not a structured settlement involved? Should they submit? What's kind of the take there?
Daniel, if you don't mind, I'm going to get us started on this. Matt, in my opinion, you should always submit as a structure, right? And that's not just me speaking as a settlement consultant. Really, from if you submit it as a lump sum, and Daniel, I know we've seen this back in the day whenever it used to be the $0, right? We had instances where a client, a carrier would submit as a $0 MSA, thinking that they were in the good. So go ahead and do it as a lump sum, right? No need to structure $0.
Yeah.
Then you get a counter hire from CMS, and it's a big number, right? It's a 6-figure number. Now you're still wanting to proceed with settlement, but you don't necessarily want to pay that 6-figure sum as a lump sum anymore. Now you would structure it. Well, now you've got to go back to CMS and notify them that you want to change the funding from lump sum payments to annuitized funding, which is fine. You can certainly do so. Not an arduous task, but now you have to have that conversation with the claimant as well and with opposing counsel and saying, hey, we've got this big number MSA. We actually want to structure it. And now you've got to walk it back a little bit and have that conversation, educate on what the structure entails and how that works. Whereas if you just submit it as a structure on the front end and you end up wanting to pay it out in a lump sum, there's no problem with that. There's nothing stopping you from paying out that MSA as a lump sum, even though you submitted it as a structure.
Yeah. So how would someone actually do that? Walk people through the process. If they've never submitted something to CMS before, what do they need to do?
Yeah. So when I prepare the MSA, I will break it down. There's a formula, a calculation for how CMS wants you to calculate the initial seed money deposit. Then they have annual installment payments. So I'll build that into my MSA pretty much in every one. And then that gives you the flexibility. If you want to get an annuity quote, you'll know what you're looking at to fund that amount. When you submit it to CMS, in my cover letter, I have to include those calculations if we're going to submit it as an annuitized funding. But very easy because it's all right there. And you're not committed to it at all. You can change it later. Like I said, you can make it a lump sum after the fact if you want, and CMS is fine with that. So you might as well start out, with those calculations in hand.
Okay.
Options, right?
Yeah.
Gives the settling parties more options starting out that way with annuitized funding.
So, and I hear this all the time when I go to conferences, right? You see the title of the course or the roundtable that you're going to go to submit or not to submit. That is the question.
What's the answer, Daniel?
Yeah. What is the answer?
With my clients,
Yeah.
And again, I've got a defense background. So I was a workers' comp insurance defense attorney for exclusively pretty much for 27 years in South Carolina and then in North Carolina. So I kind of bring that into my MSA preparation work, very conservative with my recommendations. My set of clients now is almost exclusively self-insured clients. So they control the money and their pool of clients. I recommend to my clients, if you qualify to submit it. Let's put it in CMS's hands and let CMS tell us what's required to adequately consider Medicare's interest and take all the guesswork out. And CMS very strongly encourages people to submit if it meets the workload review thresholds. So I don't see any downside in that. There's some situations where you may not want to do that or need to do that if they have other insurance available and there's not going to be any kind of transfer of obligation to Medicare. But in general, yeah, submit it if you can, if you have that option. And then everybody's on the same page. There's no added obligations on the claimant's part. If the money runs out, they hadn't submitted it. So yeah, that's my long answer to that short question.
You had alluded to this earlier, Daniel, that your goal when you're submitting is 10%, right? To be in that range. I think sometimes there's this misconception that we got to counter hire. Well, is that a bad thing, right? You were testing the limits. You didn't just submit a big number. If you're never getting that counter hire, what does that say about the entity that you have submitting those MSAs on your behalf? If you're that self-insured client, man, they've got 100%. They've come back, and Medicare's been good with the number. They nailed it every time,
right?
Maybe they are a little over every time, and Medicare loves that too. So I think when Daniel says that 10%, if you want to speak to that a little bit deeper, Daniel.
Yeah, again, with my specific set of clients, we see eye to eye on this. We never want to overfund a set-aside that's submitted to CMS. And I don't think the claimants want it overfunded either. They want to have as little money as possible allocated to a set-aside from their total settlement recovery. So that's kind of the one time all of the parties are in agreement. Let's hire Daniel or whoever to prepare an MSA, but let's not inflate it. So my numbers, my approval rating, the first go round is probably going to be significantly worse than some of the vendors that really use that metric and rely on that. But I get a lot of second opinion MSAs where somebody's prepared one that may look too big. So we try to do some work on that, get it reasonable and realistic and where we think CMS is going to approve it. We're not trying to cheat anybody. Neither side gets an advantage, but we want to make sure we're protecting Medicare's interests, but not overinflating, for no reason. And the whole point is to make that money last during the lifetime while they're getting treatment ongoing for the work injury. And if they do run out, then hopefully they can go to Medicare and use it or some other form of insurance. But we never want to make it too big. So if I get a counter hire, it's not always a bad thing. We can talk about sometimes when it is a bad thing, when we get surprised and they throw in some things that nobody anticipated. But
can we dive in on that real fast on the counter hire? So when it comes back higher than you anticipate, when CMS is like, "Hey, you missed something," what are some solutions that you can figure out or do in that situation? How can you address that?
It creates more work for the parties, but let me give you a specific example of what happened recently. Another vendor prepared an MSA for a client. It was over $900,000 in the MSA proposal, and that's what they wanted to submit to CMS. I looked at it. We got it down to just over $100,000, which was still a high number, but it was more realistic based on the current treatment. We submitted it, and it came back last week, a counter hire for $300,000, which is still better than what the other vendor proposed. But
yeah,
so I little win, lowercase w, but they had included lifetime intrathecal pain pump cost. And we were like, what in the world is that? It's a back injury, back and neck. So we scoured back through the medical records, and 2 years ago, the nurse practitioner mentioned at the very end of the note, discussed the possibility of ITP, claimant is going to research it. And that was it.
Wow.
Never a recommendation for it. But with the psych eval and the permanent placement and the trials and all that, it was $200,000 added to the value. So we asked for a re-review. Are you sure, CMS, that you considered this? It was one mention of this extraordinary cost, and it was never recommended. They said, no, we didn't misapprehend or misunderstand anything. That's the number. So we're faced now with having to either get the treating provider to expressly state that this is not a treatment recommendation. So that's the number one option. Or get the Workers' Comp Commission to have a hearing on whether or not the carrier's responsible for that. So that would have to be a hearing on the merits. This is all new evidence. So to submit new evidence, you have to ask for an amended review. You can only do it one time, so you have to make sure you've got all the evidence lined up. But they just changed the rules at CMS where you can do it immediately. We had to wait a year previously, and we only had a limited window, but now you can immediately ask for a amended review, present that evidence. And we've been pretty successful with that. If you get the doctor to very specifically address that one issue, or even better, that I think a court order or a commission order is the gold standard always. So if you can get that, we were seeing it a lot with spinal cord stimulators. So if any provider anywhere in the history of the claim mentioned that, we're going to consider spinal cord stimulator, CMS is going to throw that in. So we knew to look for that. So we would get the doctor to address it beforehand and not have to do it after the fact. But this pain pump is a new one for me.
Yeah. Well, it's okay. So that's kind of the first part of the transaction. So whether to or not submit, dealing with counter hires or working through them specifically, as we kind of move through this process, kind of bringing this all together, I think there could be another option for folks to consider, and that could be, actually structuring that MSA specifically. So Madison, let's just say counter hire comes back, you can't make changes or what have you. There isn't a higher cost now that it was not anticipated. What else could people do when it comes to solving for this?
Yeah, I mean, I think what is their settlement philosophy, Matt, going into that submission? If they're already submitting it as a lump sum, if they're not, they're not in the habit or in the practice of structuring all their MSAs, I think it's a missed opportunity. Number one, because you have the federal government backstopping that MSA, right? Certainly, if you're going to submit, you can structure out that MSA, and if that money ever runs out, temporarily exhausts, you have CMS, you have Medicare acknowledging that they're aware that it was funded in this manner, and that if there's a temporary exhaustion, they're going to step in as long as it was correctly administered, right? And that's the nice complement to professional administration. So if you're going to submit to CMS, probably a good idea to also include an administrator. And now the structure becomes that third leg, that third prong, to a really effective settlement solution for these MSA submissions. So you've submitted to CMS, it's come back counter hire, fine. That's what the number is. To your point, we've explored other options, and that's what the number is going to be. Okay, well, now do you not settle because that you have sticker shock and it came back, $100,000 higher? Well, that claim's only going to get worse with time, right? So if you want to truly close out that claim and get those, claims closed out off your books, still explore it. You don't pay it out as a lump sum. Okay, are you familiar with how to structure? You bring in someone like myself or another Ringler settlement consultant to help educate the settling parties. Maybe the plaintiff's counsel is already aware and familiar with it. Maybe it's educating the defense attorney, educating the adjuster, the risk manager, to help them see that if we can structure this annuity, this MSA, you don't need 10 years life expectancy of medical treatment next year, right? You need it over that 10-year span. So making the most of those claims dollars available. Daniel alluded to it earlier. Both sides, neither side wants to inflate that MSA and have a really high number that, claimants counsel is going to the claimant saying, hey, we've got you this six-figure sum of money, but you can't touch it for this. You can only use it for that. It's good. It's money that you'll need for your future treatment, but it is limited in how you can use it. Very necessary. Got to protect your future Medicare benefits. And you want to and you're going to need that treatment, right? So you have that money available, but by structuring it, we can free up those claims dollars to be able to be used elsewhere, right? So if you only have so much authority and you think you're going to have this $150,000 MSA, you submitted it as 75, it came back as 150, and either you don't settle and leave it open, or you do settle and you think you got to pay it all up front. You don't. You can pay a fraction of that, typically about, I'd say 25 to 30% savings, depending on the MSA, depending on the size, the age of the individual. You can incur those savings, and then, do you pass those savings along? Is it used as a negotiation tactic? Can you share in the savings with the injured party? Use it as incentive funds, put something on top of the indemnity, or just save to the bottom line for the carrier client, for the self-insured. A lot of different strategies, but if you're not already structuring and you're paying as a lump sum, there's a whole new avenue of which you can resolve some of these older claims where there's an MSA involved, where there's CMS submission. Daniel and I spoke at a conference a few months ago, and that was a big portion of what I spoke to was Medicare set-asides sometimes get a bad rap. Would you agree, Daniel? Sometimes people give that exasperated sigh, like, oh, we got to deal with the MSA. We got to call Daniel. They love dealing with Daniel. But I think the MSA can be a good thing if you're viewing it in the right lens. There can be some true savings and a benefit to reducing those claims because there's an MSA involved.
And people are always shocked when they get that annuity quote back and they see how much less expensive it is to fund that MSA if you do it over time. You pay in today's dollars and you get a huge benefit on the back end. I'm always shocked, and I've been using Ringler since 1990.
So, and I think oftentimes it's seen through the lens of the defense, right? The defense will prepare the MSA, submit it, choose whether or not it should be professionally administered or whether it should be structured. And that's oftentimes true, but plaintiff attorney can have a hand in that as well, right? Just because it's being submitted as a lump sum by the defense, if plaintiff's counsel understand the value that a structure can provide, they can suggest it, right? They can bring it up at mediation and say, why are we not structuring this $60,000 MSA? Maybe the carrier says we structure anything over 100. Well, you can still structure a $60,000 MSA. You can structure as low as, I'd say, about $30,000 MSA you could structure. And you could entertain that conversation and see what kind of savings are available. And can you bridge the gap and reach a settlement just by, again, reallocating the claims dollars?
That's a great point, because at the end of the day, someone was hurt and they need to get back on their feet. They need to move on with their life, get back to work, hopefully even depending upon the level of the injury or the severity of the injury. So let's bring this all together. So we have the MSA, we have the structure. There's a third component here, I think, just in a best practice standpoint, in a perfect world, that if you can utilize it, let's do it. And that's the professional administration piece of this. So Daniel or Madison, walk us through how that comes into play here in kind of like, creating this entire best practice for the parties involved to get this worker back to where they need to go.
You want me to start out, Madison?
Yeah, let's do the life cycle, Daniel, and it all starts with you.
I think it's, as one of my former law partners used to say, it's getting the right people on the bus. You want to have the right team, and it's all layers of protection. So so the gold standard is you submit to CMS, you get CMS approval, you have a professional administrator, which is preferred by CMS, not required, but it's strongly preferred, to protect that money, to extend the life of that money. And you have it annuitized, so you have a steady stream funding that MSA account. Talking about win-win situations, that's, in my mind, the ideal situation. And I work with great partners that can help me give great recommendations to my clients and make sure they're all protected. So it's all, to me, protecting all of the parties to the settlement. Let's say you can't submit it to CMS, then the next best thing is to have an MSA, have it professionally administered, annuitize it. So you're doing everything but getting CMS to approve it. But that's kind of the next best step if you can't submit it. And kind of working down backwards from that. The bare minimum would be, let's include some settlement language and show that we consider Medicare's interest. All right, that's bare minimum. That's statutorily, you won't get sued maybe for that. But really to fund those future needs. And I met Madison when he was involved in professional administration. He really sold me on that. I'd been working with that before, but it complements what I do so well. And I'm so pleased that Madison is now helping on the annuities, because that's the most confusing part for, I think, both sides.
Well done. And I think, if Daniel's creating the MSA and in theory, submitting to CMS, you're creating the number, you're confident in that number. You've gotten the reassurance in the back end by the, CMS saying that it's a good number. But maybe it's that high number, right? Maybe it's that, should we settle or not settle? Settle, take advantage of the tools at your disposal, such as a structure, to, again, reallocate those costs. So you take advantage of the structure. Now, a concern, and I think it's valid, is, well, if my client was going to get the MSA in a lump sum, no matter when they need the treatment, they'll have it available at their disposal. Sure. If we structure it, we're going to have that initial seed payment, and then we're going to have that revenue stream coming in annually. What if they have a really expensive year? What if they have a big surgery and that exhausts the account? What then? I think there's education there where not everybody fully understands that if there's a temporary exhaustion, that Medicare will step in for a month, for 4 months, whatever it is, until that next annuity payment happens. So that's where we got to start. We got to make sure that everybody understands that they are allowed to use they are allowed to treat, and Medicare will step in because in theory they've administered it the proper way. So we structure it to get those savings, but then by incorporating that professional administration, that's addressing that concern, right? That's ensuring that we have the Medicare Set-Aside, we've structured it through an annuity, and we've provided professional administration, because that's going to ensure that if those funds ever temporarily exhaust, all the T's are crossed, all the I's are dotted, it has been properly administered, treatment related to the injury, Medicare approved items, et cetera. So now we can send all that off to Medicare, showing them that we did exactly what was asked of the claimant. So their Medicare coverage is intact. Mr. Medicare, you need to pick up the bill for the next 4 months until that next annuity payment comes in. Great. Not only that, these professional administrators that exist, partners of Ringler's, they're really good at negotiating pricing. That is far bigger in terms of benefit than the compliance aspect, in my opinion.
Just from the drawdown standpoint, they get cheaper pricing. Yeah, they can make that money last longer.
Power, right? Yeah. So, you have over, thousands of individuals on a platform that can get you far better pricing through pharmacy, through providers, DME products, anything that injured party needed throughout the life of the claim and are likely to need post-settlement. They're just being able to get them far better pricing, workers' comp fee schedule, and most often even Medicare rates in some instances. So if that professional administrator can do a really good job of elongating those funds, the likelihood of that injured party running out of money becomes less of a concern, right? So at a former company I used to work for, they had over 30,000 individuals on their platform, primarily with MSAs. And you're looking at, let's call it 60 to 70% of those are structured with an annuity. So on a given year, less than 5% of those 30,000 individuals ever exhaust their funds. So if we go back, and the primary concern of a plaintiff's counsel might be, well, what if my client needs more money than is in the account at any given time? We've accounted for that. We've also secured professional administration, ensuring that if they run out, we're in good shape. And we're also addressing the fact that we don't want them to run out, and they likely won't run out because of what we've done, because we've built it. You got everybody on the bus, right, Daniel?
Yeah, that's the number one risk, I think, to claimants is when they self-administer, they're probably not getting fee schedule pricing when they go see the provider. The provider doesn't know how to bill them directly under the fee schedule if it's basically a self-pay. But we price the MSA based on the state fee schedule, and that's what CMS approves. So it does create a deficit if they're paying, usual and customary. They are going to blow through the money, and they are going to exhaust it. Their medical needs are going to change over time. The MSA is just a snapshot in time based on, their most recent 2 years of treatment, but it's going to change. So it's nice to have all those other safeguards in place.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, I really appreciate you taking the time. coming through, dissecting this for our audience, and also providing some best practices. So thank you so much for your insights, and have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you, Matt. Great talking with you guys.